So joining me now from his office in Calgary is Peter McCaffrey from the Alberta Institute. And I'm embarrassed that it took so long to have you on the show because you've been on my radar for a very, very long time. But I was able to see what you were able to do with like a literal shoestring budget to help get the dreaded Olympics stopped in Calgary. And now you're working, well, you founded the Alberta Institute. So I guess first things first, you might be a new face to a lot of Rebel viewers. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your background, and then tell us what the Alberta Institute does.
Sure. So my name is Peter McCaffrey. As you said, I'm the president of the Alberta Institute. Before that, I worked at a number of other think tanks and organizations doing public policy research and advocacy and things like that. In 2007, as you mentioned, we sort of just as we started getting going, we started running a campaign on the Olympics. Since then, we've expanded out to a whole bunch of different projects and all sorts of different work on everything from municipal to provincial to federal issues. So yeah, we do a lot of work on local issues in Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, Red Deer, Medicine Hat. We do public policy research across the province for provincial issues. We also do a lot of work on Alberta's place in Confederation and some of the challenges that we've been having not getting a fair deal. And we do that all from a libertarian leaning, free markets, free minds, free people perspective. So that's kind of our mission and our vision.
You know, and I think it's great that you do. I noticed on your website, you do have a large focus on municipal politics. And it's one of those things that I'm constantly banging the drum about. And I feel like I'm a bit of a crazy person just shouting at the clouds. Old lady shouts at clouds about municipal politics, because conservatives kind of look at the macro issues when we really should be looking at holding our local politicians to account, because even at the most practical level, those bad local politicians fail upwards. I mean, when you look at, especially during the Redford times, your worst MLAs were sort of came upstream through local politics, municipal politics. And, you know, those are the politics that affect us first. If our garbage doesn't get picked up, it's one of our largest tax bills with our property taxes. And yet conservatives don't really focus on it. And even with cultural issues like education and the things that our kids are being taught in school, we're not focused enough on the local school board because we're too busy fighting Justin Trudeau.
Yeah, I think that I think municipal issues are often seen as a little bit boring, you know, like it's filling in potholes and, like you said, collecting garbage and stuff. You know, people who want to be involved in politics are attracted to the provincial and the federal level because it has more prestige and more power and things like that. But that's one of the problems. You know, like we actually don't want people running our provinces and our country who are there because they want the power and they want to be in control of people's lives. We actually want people there who understand the idea of smaller government and competition and allowing the private sector to do the day-to-day managing and understand that, you know, the government has maybe a role to play as an arbitrator and to enforce, you know, private property rights and contracts and things like that. But when you have a system where the government has become so powerful over the decades, it's got more and more powerful, then that position for people is more attractive. It's more, I don't want to say not fulfilling, but it's more of an important role to be in charge of something. If that thing is more powerful. And so the provincial and the federal governments have more appeal for politicians and people who have that ambition. That the municipal level, particularly in smaller places, you do tend to have more of a community feel, more of just regular Joe or Jane wanting to get involved and help out. But we also see a trend, particularly Calgary and Edmonton, where, like you said, you have sort of budding politicians wanting to get involved in municipal politics, seeing it as a bit of a training ground, a way to get the foot in the door. And then because they have those ambitions, they actually want to increase the power of the municipal governments and increase their power and their influence. And they do that by taking on more and more a responsibility for the municipal government, often in areas that aren't the job of municipal government. So particularly Calgary and Edmonton, it's now not the job it's not just the job of the city to collect the trash and fill the potholes. They actually spend a lot of their time doing all sorts of other things on healthcare and housing and all sorts of areas that really shouldn't be their responsibility. But because there's an appeal for municipal politicians to accumulate that additional power, there's an incentive for them to go and do that. So I think it's important that people who believe in free markets and competition in the private sector are getting involved at all the different levels, because we actually have to push back against some of those ideas. We actually don't need every level of government doing everything. We don't need a municipal government that gets involved in provincial and federal issues. We need a municipal government to focus on their core job of municipal issues and leave the other stuff to the other levels of government, and vice versa as well.
And there's some, I don't know what I would call it, maybe like performative politicianing. I don't know what the right word is, when you get these municipal politicians wanting to demonstrate how good they would be at another level, or, just spending other people's money to prove how tolerant they are, how green they are, whatever it is. I think one of the best examples of this is probably the Edmonton solar farm that's going up in our river valley. It's going to make a statistical rounding error of the city's electricity every single day, because the city has this initiative to power one water treatment plant for a little bit each day. And so they're putting up acres and acres and acres of solar panels, toxic solar panels in the river valley. And you're not hearing anything from the people who are normally like, I don't want a pipeline in my backyard. Don't, don't dig for coal here. They're perfectly fine with this stuff. And it's done by a council that, it almost feels like short guy syndrome, where they're like, oh, we're from Edmonton. We have to show the world how metropolitan we are. Look at our solar panels.
I think that is part of it. And then I also think there's another element, which is that if you're on the left and you hold the ideology that government is the solution to problems, then, and I've seen them say this, whether it be in council meetings or at public meetings, things like this. If you're a local official and you don't like what the province or the federal government is doing on a public policy area that is technically the federal or provincial governments, but you think that this is such an important thing that, it's a crisis, whatever the thing might be a crisis about, and therefore it needs to be done, then they say, well, for the greater good, we're going to ignore the fact that this isn't our jurisdiction and we're going to do it anyway. Right. So, that evil provincial government isn't spending enough money on policy X, and technically it's their responsibility, not ours. But we have to step in anyway, because it's our moral obligation to do so. And we couldn't possibly allow the provincial government to not do their job properly. And so we have to get involved. But that presents a challenge for those of us that do believe in smaller government, because when you had effective a separation of powers between the different levels of government, then whether that level of government increases or decreases its powers can be determined by lobbying or controlling or advocating to that level of government. We're now in that situation where even if we win a debate at the federal level, the province might step in and replace the federal government. Or if we win the debate at the provincial level, the federal government will step in and say, well, the province isn't doing its job, so then we're going to step in and we're going to mandate it. Or we win the debate at the municipal level and the province steps in, or we win the debate at the provincial level and the municipal government steps in. So we almost now have to win this debate and win these arguments and promote our ideas and convince people at every level at the same time in order to win on an issue. Because it's like whack-a-mole, right? We convince the correct level of government to do the right thing, and then just a different level of government steps in and starts spending a ton of money on it instead, right? So I think one, municipal politics are really important anyway, because like you said, they are local, they affect people, and people should be paying attention, they should be getting involved. And also because we have this breakdown in the division of jurisdiction and powers in Canada now, where the constitutional delineation between what different levels of government's supposed to do is kind of blown apart and doesn't exist anymore. Realistically, if you want influence on provincial issues, you have to get involved in the municipal level as well.
If you'd like to get access to my show, as well as other great TV style shows too, like Ezra's Nightly Ezra Levant Show and David Menzies' Friday night show, Rebel Roundup, just go to rebelnews.com/subscribe. That's rebelnews.com/subscribe.